Tiffany Henyard, the beleaguered mayor of Dalton, Illinois, and the supervisor of Thornton Township, is in danger of going bankrupt after a series of scandals, public outcry, and a humiliating electoral loss. After a stunning defeat in a pivotal election that might ultimately result in her collapse, the once dominant leader, who had long utilized her political positions to amass power, is now dealing with the aftermath. This election loss is more than just a setback. It's the disintegration of a career characterized by ostentatious, twisted accusations of corruption, and as State Senator Napoleon Harris hosted the first Democratic caucus in Thornton Township in decades, tensions were high. Supporters of Henyard, many of whom were allegedly exploiting township resources, were left waiting outside because a room could be utilized, and the gathering devolved into a political circus. Henyard's political aspirations were severely hampered when she was not selected for the Democratic battle for the post of township supervisor. By the time the Henyard team arrived, the doors had already been closed, and it could barely hold 600 people, with Henyard's supporters excluded from the caucus process. What had begun as a logistical catastrophe quickly devolved into a political battle. In barely 7 minutes, what had begun as a fierce political battle came to a conclusion, and Harris and his slate were declared the Democratic nominees for the April election. Henyard's chances of being re-elected as township supervisor were essentially dashed by this quick win. The audience cheered, but Henyard was clearly incensed and accused Harris of hosting an unlawful gathering. With a trembling voice, she screamed, "You didn't run any of this the right way." Her desperation went beyond simple anger. She was aware that her political future was uncertain without a Democratic ticket spot, and that her only remaining option was to run as a write-in candidate, which was unlikely at best. But in the background, a fresh legal dispute was developing, and Henyard was embroiled in a public dispute. 2 meetings earlier in the year were allegedly inappropriately conducted, according to Henyard's team, but Harris and his staff had strictly adhered to the procedures to meet the qualifications for the Democratic nomination. Hen's grievances over the caucus process were promptly shut down, and Burton, Harris's lawyer, clarified that this is a decades-old procedure that is lawful, democratic, and it was growing annoyances from citizens who had become more and more disenchanted with her leadership, or lack thereof, marked her time as mayor of Dalton. Given her history of abusing the law, one neighbor aptly summed up the feeling when she stated that unfair techniques and voting suppression were viewed with suspicion. Years of accusations of corruption and financial mismanagement had already ruined her political career and sent it into a tailspin. Despite the glaring evidence of her political demise, her attitude to the caucus loss seemed to suggest that her reign was coming to an ignoble conclusion. Her time in government has been riddled with scandal. Henyard's reaction to the tragic loss was characteristically dramatic, but she refused to concede defeat. The audience cheered as loudly as they could as she bounded out of the auditorium with a handful of loyal followers who shared her incredulity at the result. The facts were simple. Henyard's failure to meet the qualifications for the nomination was the reason for her defeat in the caucus, not any wrongdoing or suppression of the vote. Although it was unpleasant for Henyard, the reality was clear to the people of Dalton, who were now prepared for a change, and her charges of unfair tactics were denied. She had reached the end of her political career, which had been characterized by power conflicts and controversy. The caucus defeat was not the end of Henyard's political demise. The public's growing disapproval of her leadership was still evident. The people of Dalton had already decided, and Henyard's loss at the caucus was only another chapter in her struggle to stay in power despite mounting opposition, legal challenges, and public criticism that made it obvious her tenure was up. Not only was the most recent political drama in Dalton about a lost caucus seat, but it also served as a sobering reminder of Henyard's tumultuous tenure in government, during which her political reputation was irrevocably marred by scandal, negligence, and a decline in public trust. Henyard had utilized her twin positions as township supervisor and mayor to solidify her influence, but now she had to decide if she could save any remnant of her political career or if she would become forgotten, her name permanently linked to the contentious incidents that plagued her term. Henyard had ruled with a sense of superiority for years, utilizing her positions to control the political scene and profit herself, but it now seemed that the public could no longer put up with her controversial leadership and excesses. As the public's contempt for her leadership increased, one observer suggested that karma justice was at work. It was clear that Hen's demise was ironic. She was being drowned out by her constituents, who had long accused her of yelling over others and ignoring dissenting voices. Style. The public's distaste for Henyard extended beyond her political stunts. They were also tired of her wasteful spending, particularly with public funds. Her behavior was obviously at odds with the values she had been elected to uphold, and her ability to maintain control declined. Along with her political career, Henyard's political career was essentially ended by the court cases and public uproar, and she became a symbol of political chaos. And it's clear that the residents of Thornton Township and Dalton didn't want her to remain in office. Henyard wasn't going down without a fight, but the upcoming election in April, with Harris's slate now in control, would likely be the final straw for Hen's political aspirations. Her fans, albeit dwindling in number, remained loyal, and she held onto the belief that she could still save her reputation, despite the fact that her political career seemed to be crumbling before her eyes. The legal disputes, public unhappiness, and escalating scandals that surrounded her term made it seem more and more doubtful that Henyard would be able to repair the harm done to her political reputation. Henyard's political collapse ultimately serves as a cautionary tale about the misuse of authority and the catastrophic and permanent loss of political clout that can arise from the deterioration of public confidence. Dalton and Thornton Township's destiny is currently in the hands of will likely be remembered as a sign of scandal failure and the cause of betraying public trust in the case of new leadership and Hen's name, once anonymous with political control. Under close examination and mounting demands for responsibility, Tiffany Henyard, the former mayor of Dalton, Illinois, and supervisor of Thornton Township, is now a representation of political dysfunction. Her leadership has caused a great deal of harm, including financial mismanagement, legal issues, and mounting public indignation, which have rendered her once powerful position. The citizens of Thornton Township have suffered greatly as a result of Henyard leadership. A growing sense of disappointment has resulted from the community's financial struggles, many of which are directly related to the Henyard administration. A city on edge and a political future that now appears all but lost are the results of her term, which was characterized by lavish expenditure, a combative leadership style, and a decline in faith in her administration. Many citizens have been enraged by this degree of excess, particularly during the township's financial difficulties. Henyard's disdain for financial responsibility was further evidenced when one landlord even sought for her eviction on the grounds that she had not paid her rent. Tens of thousands of dollars were spent on first-class travel, upscale lodging, fine eating, and an incredible $33,000 Amazon buy in a single day, among other startling information. Her confrontational and harsh leadership style, which detractors characterize as dismissive and dominating, was another factor that made her a contentious figure. She sees anyone who disagrees with her as an enemy, according to one former official who even went so far as to label her actions bullying. Over time, a growing number of residents felt disconnected from their local government as a result of her combative style, which alienated many constituents in addition to her co-workers. After facing significant political setbacks, Henyard made a bold declaration announcing her intention to remain mayor and her determination to fight this decision. However, many have seen this as the ultimate insult to a community already suffering under her leadership, as the level of discontent and mistrust in Thornton Township has only increased as a result of her refusal to step down despite multiple scandals and an escalating legal cloud over her administration. The controversy and legal disputes surrounding Henyard have also drawn attention to a number of her close associates, some of whom are charged with defrauding her. The suspicion of her administration was further heightened by one particularly egregious incident involving a senior police officer and Henyard ally who was recently charged with bankruptcy fraud. According to reports, the FBI is deepening its investigation into her financial activities. Henyard's aggressive leadership style and mounting legal problems have put her political future in jeopardy. Despite her best efforts, it is clear that her hold on power is slipping, and the residents of Thornton Township are growing increasingly upset and vociferous in their demands for responsibility. The scandal surrounding Henyard doesn't stop with her, and the consequences of her actions could soon bring an abrupt end to her rule. Her charity, the Tiffany Henyard Cares Foundation, has faced criticism for not disclosing how it utilizes his donations, in addition to using township resources, including buses, to drive supporters to an important caucus. The charity has been directed by the Illinois Attorney General's office to stop accepting donations until it conforms with state laws. The idea that Henyard is prepared to use the law to serve her interests has been strengthened by her disregard for the correct procedures. The outrageous detractors argue that this is just another example of Henyard using public resources for personal gain. Social media has been flooded with comments calling for Henyard to be charged and prosecuted for government corruption just because she received a Tiffany, and the outcry against her has turned into a rallying cry for people who seek justice and accountability. One commenter echoed the sentiments of many who believe that Henyard's actions have gone unchecked, for Henyard stays defiant at a fiery press conference following the caucus loss, saying the show will go on, but many believe her words ring hollow. Even her staunchest followers are starting to lose faith, and the idea of her winning as a write-in candidate looks increasingly remote. The displeasure is clear, as one homeowner commented, "You don't even have the sense of look in our eyes, but you rather just steal our money and do what you want." Keith Price, an unusual ally, optimistically asserted that enough people are aware of Hen's name to write it on the ballot, but even he seemed doubtful about Hen's continued battle to stay in office. Former NFL player and businessman Napoleon Harris is emerging as a key opponent. Harris earned a landslide victory at the Democratic caucus and is now focusing on the topics that are important to the majority of the community. Harris has vowed to provide transparency, accountability, and effective leadership to Thornton, while Harris's political career continues to falter. She has officially launched a re-election bid in a Facebook post, but this seems to represent the beginning of the end for her political goals, considering the ongoing investigations into her financial condition. Thornton Township residents are eager for change and are confident that Harris can fulfill his promises, as seen by his victory at the caucus. Now, the question is whether Henyard will keep spending time and money on legal battles that might never end well, or if she will finally take a backseat and let the community recover from the harm she has inflicted. Henyard has few allies and even fewer alternatives as a result of dealings, the expanding list of litigation, and public dissatisfaction. Her demise has elicited a resoundingly unfavorable response from the public, with social media being flooded with comments from both residents and political watchers. Many view Henyard's decline as a sort of poetic justice, a long overdue reality. Tiffany regularly shouts over people in meetings, and now she's the one getting shouted down. This is one observation or remark. Many people who believe that Henyard's crimes have finally caught up with her share this sentiment, which some call karma, justice, and action. Many neighbors are growing more and more irritated, while others are celebrating. At least now we have an opportunity to move on. Even if we will be cleaning up her mess for some time, there is a tangible sense of hope for a fresh start away from the scandals and turmoil that characterized Henyard's tenure in office. But as the election approaches, it is unclear if the new leadership will be able to genuinely rebuild trust in the local government. Thornton Township has suffered irreversible damage as a result of Henyard leadership, and it will take years, if not decades, to repair the damage. The stakes for Henyard have never been higher, the route forward is far from clear, and the residents of Thornton Township are keeping a careful eye on everything. The future is unclear. The growing legal issues, the increasing inquiries into her financial activities, and the increasing demands for accountability all suggest that Harris will either keep his word and implement the kind of change Thornton Township desperately needs, or he will be sidetracked by the challenges of cleaning up the mess Henyard is left behind. Thornton Township is prepared for change, but we Henyard will allow it to occur. But one thing is for sure, Thornton Township's future is at stake, and this narrative is far from over. We appreciate your interest in Celebrity Insider. Gloomy outlook. Will she eventually concede the repercussions of her conduct and resign, or will she keep fighting for her political survival?